Where do humans come from? For years, there have been many scientists who have tried to give an answer to this question. And although the theories that are known are diverse, we know not all of them are true. Charles Darwin, with his proposal that species change over time, create new ones, and share a common ancestor, became an important place for many researchers. Nevertheless, other theories exist that, in spite of not having obtained the same popularity for being little credible, they're considered like part of the human evolution. If you don't believe us, get ready to learn with us the 5 true theories of evolution that sound like lies, but aren't. But before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. God's creations. If you're a religious person, then most likely you know the theory of creationism in depth. Contrary to other hypotheses, creationism basically consists of the set of religious beliefs in which both the universe and living beings come from the divine creation or from a higher power. They've been forged in the image and likeness of God. This theory isn't supported by scientific facts, but by questions of faith. In the same way in which it appears in the Bible, believers consider that was the way it all happened. However, not everyone, including scientists, approve this theory of creationism as true. How is it possible that human beings have been created by a being unknown to us? Well, the classical creationists deny any kind of biological and human evolution, as well as scientific explanations about the origin of life. For them, the only truth comes from Christianity, in which a literal interpretation of what is described in Genesis is made. How about that? Although it seems strange, believing in scientific theories isn't entirely bad. But they can't fully explain all the phenomena and the great biological, vegetable, and animal diversity that exists in the world. That's why creationism can't be ignored or judged as fake, when even scientists themselves are still doubtful about it. Whether you believe in this theory or find yourself in favor of evolution, the outcome is the same. The universe came from nothing at some point in the past. The Big Bang Theory, despite having been one of the explanations the scientists have tried to offer, is similar. The difference is that this one states that everything was created without cause or purpose. According to Christians, God created man with a clear idea of what he wanted. But alternatively, by supporting the idea of divine creation, we assume that everything came out of nothing and by the will of a higher being that isn't limited by time and space. What do you think? Are you in favor of the theory of creationism, or on the contrary, do you stick with the one granted by Darwin? If you think you already have the answer, it's best you keep watching our video, because we're just beginning. And although we won't name them all, there are some other hypotheses about evolution that will leave you open-mouthed. Number 4. Great Chain of Being. Taking some of the most essential characteristics of creationism, the theory of the chain of being, or scala natura, goes back to the most ancient representations of biblical nature. A clear example of this could be the famous Jacob's Ladder, in which the origin or organization of man is handled in the form of steps. The hypothesis affirmed that all organisms can be ordered in a linear, continuous, and progressive manner. This means that it can be ordered from the simplest to the most complex one. Normally, the last one is identified with man, and yes, this theory probably doesn't seem too strange, but scientists had their doubts about it in the past. Could man really come from the lowest level of the evolutionary chain? As people are used to impose their will and always be at the highest point, many had rejected this idea as something absurd. However, over the years, the scientific point of view began to arouse enthusiasm for progress and the power of reason. The old beliefs were questioned, and it was suggested that the natural world and the human condition could change, being considered as part of evolution. What do you think? Would you have also rejected this hypothesis as one of the forms of life? Darwin's theories are undoubtedly much stronger, we don't question that, but it's not the only one, so we can't ignore the others, much less when each one seems to be so interesting. Number 3. Mutant beings. Would you believe in a theory capable of affirming human beings come from mutations? Yes, you can laugh all you want. It seems a bit strange, and it's not our intention to deny such a thing. But even if you find it hard to believe, this theory really exists. Maybe not in the style of Marvel movies, but it does, and it's called mutationism. You're probably wondering what it is, but calm down, we're going to explain it right away. Mutationism includes all those hypotheses about evolution, in which the main force of organic change is mutation, which in turn causes a discontinuous evolution. The theory arose from the genetic research proposed by Mendel in the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th. Hugo de Vries was responsible for it, and although at first people didn't take it into account as it was a somewhat crazy idea, de Vries managed to distinguish 2 types of variations that helped him to continue integrating himself into the fields of scientific research. The first one was modifications caused by environmental changes that aren't inherited. The second variation was the mutations or alterations that occur in the genes of living organisms that are transmitted by inheritance, that is, by those discrete factors of descendants. The scientists claimed these mutations occurred randomly and couldn't necessarily bring improvements in the family tree. Over the years, many other mutationists joined the cause. And contrary to what was thought at the beginning, they came to the conclusion that the mutations weren't given by creative selection. That is, the course of evolution was always going to have some control over the genes to be inherited. By 1903, mutationism was on the same scale as natural selection. 50 years later, this selection was already considered as the only evolutionary force. But the story about this theory of evolution doesn't end here. In 1927, Hermann Joseph Muller found that a high exposure to X-rays was capable of increasing the mutation rate. Did you think this only happened in movies? Also, radiation such as ultraviolet rays and other chemicals can also act as a perfect trigger for mutations. How about that? Amazing, right? The next time you need to have a medical checkup at the hospital, you should think about it twice. Those machines may seem innocent as well as your doctor's hands, but we think you probably don't want to become a mutant. Number 2. Primordial soup theory. There is nothing like a good plate of hot soup to get warm during the winter season. A good dose of flavor will always be well received by your taste buds. Since we were little kids, our parents have fed us with this popular dish. But what would you think if we assure you that one of the origins of life could be based on this appetizing food? That's right, just as you heard it. Known as the primordial soup, this theory explains that organic life originated through the liquid of oceans and lagoons approximately more than 4 billion years ago. Can you believe it? We're sure no one would consider a hypothesis as crazy as this one, but we're going to explain it in more detail right now. This concept exists due to the Russian biologist Alexander Oparin, who in 1924 postulated that the origin of life on Earth is due to the evolution of carbon molecules in our body. A combination of chemical agents such as methane, ammonia, and hydrogen were unified with some type of energy to later become the basis of proteins. According to Oparin, these sources of power were ultraviolet rays and electricity. The result of this was the formation of new but simple structures of RNA that were dragged by the rain to the ocean environment where life continued to make its way to what is nowadays known as DNA. These were hot and with little oxygen. How about it? For this theory to have an important value within the scientific world, the researchers started making diverse experiments. They're based mainly on the reproduction of an isolated place that meets the climatic conditions the Earth had millions of years ago. The primordial soup would only be made there, and in the way the structures of those possible primitive creatures would emerge. It sounds pretty strange, but it really worked, or at the time it did, because it served to answer some of the questions people were asking about human evolution. Stanley Miller, a scientist at the University of Chicago, was the first to test this interesting experiment. In 1953, he introduced water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen into a glass container to simulate these supposed conditions of the primitive Earth. The mixture was exposed to electric shocks, and a week later, several amino acids and organic molecules were formed. How about that? We're sure next time you won't reject a theory, however crazy and strange it may seem. Looks are deceiving, and although at first you may find them weird or fake, you only need to do a little research so you can have a different perspective. Our next and last case is proof of that. Number 1. Theories of catastrophe. Can you imagine the world as we know it today being created through natural disasters? Considering that these same events are currently destroying our planet, it's strange to imagine that in the past they were the ones who created it. However, although many consider it as a joke, this hypothesis really exists and is called catastrophism. This theory emerged between the 17th and 19th centuries thanks to the French paleontologist Georges Cuvier. This theory affirmed that the Earth, in its origin, had been created in a catastrophic way. That is, after going through climatic events and natural disasters such as earthquakes, tornadoes, and floods. Have you ever seen the movie The Croods? Just as it happens during the animated film, this hypothesis revealed that those natural disasters were shaping the Earth. And although some creatures and part of the vegetation began to die, other more fortunate managed to move into new areas, causing incredible changes both geological and biological in the constitution of our planet. At least that's what Cuvier claimed after having found fossils with the remains of those species that perished during the mentioned catastrophes. It's said that these creatures were buried under the earth before being replaced by others, which explained the difference between the two despite living in the same territory. That was how Cuvier managed to prove our planet Earth was much more primitive than it was thought at first, and that it even seemed to have been inhabited by a large number of living beings different from the current ones. How about that? Christians also played an important role in the construction of this theory. However, Cuvier never used the references of the Bible, but the scientific ones. The supernatural events during the episode of Noah's Ark was one of them. Our universe is mysterious and complex. Over the years, new theories that try to explain our way of life will continue to appear. But no matter how strange they may seem to you, now you know that you should give each one a chance. Maybe you'll find things as interesting as these ones. Alright, Top Fivers, if you haven't already, make sure to visit our other channel, The Brilliant, for even more interesting list videos that'll blow your mind. But I'm warning you, the videos over on The Brilliant are extremely addicting to watch as well. There'll be a link in the description to the channel, so make sure to come and visit us. Or you can go to our latest video popping up on screen right now. Oh, and have you visited TheFinestPost.com to enjoy the most amazing articles you'll ever get to read?